I'm Greg Sowell, and this is Why Am I, a podcast where I have conversations with interesting folks to try and trace a path to where they find themselves today. My guest this go around is Willy Bearden. If you've ever been curious about the history in Memphis or the Mississippi Delta, odds are you've seen one of his videos, or perhaps come across one of his books. He's a Southern gentleman who loves telling stories. He documents the people who've made history in the South so that they may live on. And my personal hope is that also he'll live on amongst them. Enjoy this chat with Willy. Willy Bearden, thank you for joining me on the Why Am I podcast. I'm not sure that I told you that it was the Why Am I podcast, but there you are.
Yeah. Well, I want to find why am I.
Well, I do too. And that's, it's funny. Every time I ask somebody else that question, I learn more about myself and figure myself out a little bit more. So it's kind of a
it goes that
self-fulfilling
way,
prophecy. That's why I started this whole thing. But how I usually start this is I like to tell you that you and I are somewhere killing time. How about we're catching a cab together to the airport? We get stuck in traffic. Okay. So I introduce myself, and what am I this go around? I am a screen printer. I make T-shirts. And I tell you all about that. Okay. Now it's your turn to reciprocate. So who are you, Willy?
Gosh, I am a 71-year-old guy. I live in Memphis. I've lived in Memphis since 1971. I hitchhiked into Memphis in 1971, and I grew up down in the Mississippi Delta in a little town called Rolling Fork, and we that part of the Delta we call the Deep Delta. It's way down in the Delta. It's about 3 hours south of Memphis. And I didn't realize this for a long time, but as I read more and as I moved around the world a little more, I found that I had grown up in the middle of one of the most incredibly interesting places in the world. And that I grew up around people who were storytellers. I grew up around people who were authentic in their good ways and their bad ways. And because, there's, you have to know both of those sides. And I saw that I got my education not only in school, and I wasn't a good student at all. I was too busy fooling around.
The most interesting people were never good students.
Yes, right. You can't be, because generally you're not scared. You're trying to kind of wind your way through whatever life that you're living at that moment. And, you're just trying to have fun and trying to make people laugh or whatever. I always liked to make people laugh. I always wanted to make people feel good. I always tell people I got my undergraduate degree in the beauty shop. My mother was a beautician in a small town. And in our town, there were about, I guess, when I was growing up in the 50s and 60s there were maybe 2,200 people. So I knew everybody in town. I knew their cousins. I knew their aunts and uncles. So it was one of those things that, I mean, a lot of people suffer from nostalgia. Mm. I don't really suffer from nostalgia, but I hear a lot of people. I see people on Facebook and people who are my age now. People went to school with, oh God, it was the greatest place to grow up, and we were always good. And when our parents called us when the street lights came on, we went right home, and nobody was ever mean to each other. I'm thinking, you're wrong. You're wrong. There were good and bad things that happened, and a lot of bad things that happened in the Mississippi Delta, especially in the 1950s and 60s. And so certainly I was aware of that. And today I try to kind of honor the truth that was, my hometown and the things that I saw by talking about those things honestly. Mm. And And there were, like I say, a lot of bad things, and certainly a lot of good things too. There were people who could be good and bad at the same time, and which I think in my business now, that is always interesting to me, to see people who can, just be so good to people and then turn around and be horrible to people. And how people slip into those kinds of things. But, growing up in a small town, like I said, I knew everybody. When I was a kid, I had little jobs everywhere. Once a month, I washed the big plate glass windows at the auto parts store, and they'd pay me $3. And I would mow somebody's yard. I had a paper route for a while. I did everything. My first real job was working out in the cotton fields, chopping cotton. And let me tell you, that is about the hardest job in the world. The rows down in the Delta were sometimes a mile long. So if you can imagine being out there in the broiling June sun and looking down that road that was a mile long, you didn't think you were ever going to get to the end of that. But even in the middle of that, there were a bunch of kids out there, and we played and fought and goofed around and sang and all this stuff, because you use what you have, right? I mean, that's all you can do. You use what you have. And so, growing up like that, I never felt like I was deprived of anything, because, we made our fun where we could. But I think that certainly made me the person I am today. I mean, hanging around the beauty shop for sure. I mean, you would hear every piece of gossip in that city in, I don't know, an hour's time. You knew who had gotten thrown out of their house because they came home drunk, you would get, just all of these things. You knew what was going on. And generally, I will say that was about the only time I was ever quiet, because I didn't want anybody to know I was there, and I would just kind of sit there and wait for them to start talking. And because people always say you'll tell your hairdresser anything, and I believe that. People used to talk to my mother like that. My mother was a very sweet person. She was very smart, and she was very empathetic. And even though we were poor, she always helped people who were poorer than we were. And so just kind of sitting there watching all that, it was a rich gumbo of humanity. And watching how those people behaved and what they talked about and what they did and all that just kind of informed me that, we human beings are here for a number of reasons, but one of the main reasons is to connect with one another. And you connect by telling stories. So, God, I used to hear so many great stories in the beauty shop. By the time I was about 13 or 14, I went to my graduate school, which was the pool hall. And that was the place. I wasn't allowed in the pool hall, but I went anyway. And I don't know. I always think about this. When I was about, my friend's father owned the pool hall, and they were kind of outlaws. And his father was a binge drinker. And so about every 2 or 3 months, he would just kind of lay up drunk for a week. And we were in the pool hall. So I would rack balls for people. I'd rack up the pool balls. I would sell what little food they had. Of course, on the counter of a place like that, you got pig's feet, pickled pig's feet, and pickled eggs, and sausages and things like that, and beer. I was selling beer when I was, 14 years old to people. Somebody would have gotten thrown under the jail had they known that. But just living in a small town, I mean, it didn't seem weird to me until later. I would tell people, oh yeah, I used to say, what? You were a child, you're selling beer, But so I hung out in the pool hall a lot. And one day when I was about, 16 or 17, I was sitting out on the curb in front of the pool hall, and I was thinking, you know, I got to get out of here. I got to get out of here, because I was watching the cars ride by, and we were right there on the square in Rolling Fork. The courthouse was across the street, and to go anywhere in Rolling Fork, you had to kind of go through the town square. And I was sitting there, and a car would pass, and I'd go, okay, there's Miss Truesdale. She's going over to the Jitney Jungle to buy groceries. There's Burl Yelverton. He's going to pick his kid up. You know, there's Miss Carter. She's going to pick up Buzzy, her son, from band practice. You know, I knew, not only did I know these people, I knew where they were going at that moment. And I thought, man, this is crazy. And at that moment, I also had this thought. I thought, you know, you've been sitting here listening to these guys who hang out in the pool hall, these adults who hang out in the pool hall, and they are all, to the man, they are all unemployed alcoholics. And you're listening to them. And I thought, wait. I mean, it was like this moment. And I thought, you know, all the knowledge I have about relationships and whatever, everything came from these people who were unemployed alcoholics. And so I knew I had to get out of there then. And it took me another couple of years, but I did get out of there. But having this kind of wide open upbringing in a place was really, it has served me well. And I think I could have gone in a number of different directions, but it has served me well by knowing how to tell stories, and by knowing, just looking at people and kind of getting them. You know, you kind of know what kind of person that is. You know, if it looks like a rattlesnake, stay away from it, you know, things like that. Because a lot of times in those places, things were dangerous. There were a lot of hard people, a lot of tough people down there, kind of as there are anywhere. You know, there are tough people around that you just kind of stay away from, you know. So I just think all of those things that I got from growing up down there have served me well. I will say this, when I was a senior in high school, like I said, I was not a good student. I did okay in like English and history and geography and things. I would, you know, because those things were kind of stories. I was terrible in math, just math and science. It just didn't interest me in the least. I'm very interested in that stuff now, and I'm a fairly good mathematician now. I've just learned, you know, but I'm very interested in those things. Wasn't then, but when I was a senior, like the guidance counselor would have you come to his office. And this was kind of your kind of goodbye pat on the head, if you know. And so this guy, Coach Grayson, had me in his office, and he said, Willie, what are you going to do? And I said, you know, I don't know. I said, I just have a lot of things that I'd like to do. I kind of felt like I could be a poet if I wanted to. There were no jobs open for poets that I ever saw. You know, there were not any poets where I grew up. I thought, well, you know, I'd love to be a musician. Well, yeah, that maybe or maybe not, you know, but there was not anything that I felt like I could go to college to learn to be. So I'm in there talking to him, telling him basically what I told you. He said, well, he said, and he named a farmer around there, and he said, you know, he really likes you, and you could stay right here in Rolling Fork and work on his farm. I know he's got a job, you know, and you could be driving a tractor and doing this. And I'm telling you, my face got hot, and I thought, oh my God, is this what he thinks? Is this all I have for my future? Is this what this man who is the guidance counselor, he is guiding me, and he tells me I should stay right there in that town and drive a tractor? I was like, I can't tell you how embarrassed I was. Wow. And just kind of, I thought, God, you know, the way I see myself is here, and it's very, very much unformed. unformed. Kind of, well, I'd like this. I read a lot, so I like this, and I want to do all these things. But I thought, is this how I'm presenting to the
everybody
world?
else.
And the answer came back is, yes, it is. And I thought, again, I got to get out of here.
What do you think? Do you think you were more introspective on those things? Like you just kind of kept that side of you to yourself and just didn't present it to everybody else? Do you think that's what it was?
I think you got a good point there, because I can't imagine who I would have told, I think I'd be a good poet.
Right.
Somebody would have probably beat me up or something. I don't know. But, these things that aren't the normal pathways that people take, I think that's what people like me are. You have no idea what you want to do until you do it, and you do something and it kind of feels right. It kind of, you think, okay, now I get it. I always tell people, and I get the opportunity to talk to student groups, and I talk to old folks. I do a lot of presentations every year, and talk about different things. But I always tell people, this seems to be the simplest thing in the world, but I'm going to say it anyway. You don't know till you know. You just don't.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no way to know. If you live in a small town and there are no art galleries there. I'd never been to an art gallery. If there are no people there who you would look at and say, I kind of want to be like that. If there's nobody to model, then you think, am I crazy? Am I crazy for even thinking this? I mean, and I think a lot of kids who grow up in small settings are like that. Let me say this, and we'll talk about this a little more. I got to know the historian and writer Shelby Foote, and he had written the huge 3-volume series of the Civil War. He had been the absolute star of Ken Burns' Civil War series on PBS, and he was from the Delta, and I got to know him. And he was very, very kind to me. And I was talking to him on the phone one day, and I said, why do you think that people from the Delta who come to the city, Memphis in particular, why do you think they've been successful? And he said, we got something to prove. And I thought, you're right. I mean, you're nobody. You're in a city and people ask you, where'd you go to high school? Well, I went down in the Delta, and they kind of, well, you didn't go to the good high school, or you didn't this, and you didn't have this base of friends and people who help you, and so I think coming to the city is much tougher, and you do feel like you have something to prove. Shelby Foote had to prove himself here in the 1940s. And he did so brilliantly. Yeah.
I know what you mean. I've noticed here in Texas too, these little towns, I like to think of it as space travel. Like these little towns have a certain amount of gravity, and it is so hard to break free of that gravity. And if you've got enough energy, right, you've got enough courage that you can actually break out.
Yeah.
To me, that means you're probably, not always, but you probably have the energy to do something great, right? To hit the ground running, to really hustle and move.
Yes.
Because it's scary. It's scary to leave everything you know. And those little towns, they make it so easy and so comfortable just to stay within the same 20 miles your entire life. And to me, that's crazy. I can't imagine doing that.
I can't either. I will say this. I after being gone from Rolling Fork for many years, and I would go back and do things, but after having been gone for a long time, I think it was in 2002, I bought a house there. I went down there, and because a lot of my work is I edit a lot and I write a lot. So I need quiet a lot. I have to have a workspace that I say has no distractions. Everything I do is a distraction. But, and before I start on a big, like a writing project or a big, editing an hour-long documentary or something like that, I will do anything. I will wash 10 loads of clothes. I will, vacuum the house. I will I'll do everything except that work. So I told myself if I had a house in Rolling Fork, that I could just go down there. I could take my computers with me so I could edit there. I could write there. And so I bought this house, and it was just about a block and a half from where I grew up. It was where the mayor had lived. And it was a really nice house. And when I went down there, I told people, I said, everybody was going, "Oh my God, you're moving back." They tried to get me to run for mayor first. I said, no. I don't work well with people. I will tell somebody you are a moron and I don't want to talk to you anymore. So I wouldn't have been a good mayor. But when I moved down there, I told people, I said, listen, I do a job that requires me to sit there sometimes 4 hours, 6 hours, 12 hours and do my work. And I know how to do that. I have deadlines though. So I said, if you see my car in the driveway, don't stop by. If you see me out in the yard, please stop by. And so that worked well. So many people would kind of come by, and I'd see them go slow past the house, and if I saw somebody I wanted to talk to, I would go out on the porch and wave, and they'd come in and we'd talk, but I knew I was going to have a constant throng of people through there and I would never get anything done. So I sold that house about 3 years ago, just because I wasn't going down there anymore. I had spent one night there the previous year, and I thought this is ridiculous. Somebody, who has a family and wants to have a nice house or whatever, should live here. So I sold that house, but I did enjoy my time there. It brought back a lot of the good and a lot of the bad about living there. And at that time I had started writing a book, I started writing a novel, which later, after I finished the novel, my writing partner, David Tankersley, read it and he said, "Man, this is really good." He said, "But the fictional parts aren't half as good as the real things." He said, "I know your real stories." He said, "This needs to be a memoir." So I thought, okay, God, I got to rewrite this whole thing. So I've spent the last couple of years just kind of rewriting when I have time. And I will say this, I'll be publishing that book early in 2022.
Oh, awesome.
So it's just about done. But it's those kinds of things. I think, as I say this, I think maybe I have given myself permission to do these things. And I think that's a hard decision for some people, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially when you grow up poor, there's this expectation that I'm going to immediately get out there, I'm going to start working because I have to earn. And then we just have this inborn fear of, I always have to, I gotta pay my mortgage. I gotta pay for this. I gotta pay for that. Wow. I've got to be this rock. And whenever you're taking chances, that's scary. And it sounds like you were very risk versed, so it didn't bother you a bit.
Well, I will say this. I felt for many years when I first moved to Memphis, I kind of had this vision of myself standing way, way, way in the back of the room, kind of jumping up. Hey, I can do that. Hey, I'm capable. Hey, and not only am I capable, I'm able, and I'm certainly willing to do these things. And it took a long time for me to start having the opportunities to do those things. I mean, I think I made my first documentary. I was 44, I guess. And then I made my first hour-long documentary that was on local public television when I was 51.
All right.
So I just, I think I saw so many people who were in my business, in the filmmaking business, writing business, always waiting for that grant. It was always, well, you can't do this film, you got to have a grant. You got to, and certainly back in the 70s and 80s and really mid 90s, making an hour-long film, I mean, people would get $75,000 to $100,000 for that. I mean, today I make an hour-long film for basically nothing. I have a camera, I have an edit system, I can write it, and all these things. And if you don't have to, get on planes and travel places, then pretty much it's nothing. You do it in your spare time. But back then, everybody was waiting for that magic grant. And I saw so many people kind of waste away by chasing grants. And they would be so enamored of whatever subject they wanted to do while they were chasing the grant. They would write all these things. And I would think, man, that's going to be a great film. And the moment they didn't get the grant, just forget about it. I would think, man, don't waste that. God, please don't waste that. You've got, you're feeling it now. You're passionate about it. And the world probably needs to hear this.
So whenever you saw that happen, did that ever affect friendships for you when somebody didn't chase that?
It did. I mean, I think the filmmaking business is like any other business. You got people who feel like maybe they're born into it, or maybe, they're known as the best filmmaker in Memphis or whatever, and I have found that a lot of people just like to go to the rap party, after everything. Yeah. Seriously. I mean, so many people who are on crews and things, they're not crazy about making films, but they're crazy about the hang. And that's great, because the hang in the film business is very cool. I mean, everybody thinks you're going to be, hanging or palling around with, Burt Reynolds or something. You're not, but I think a lot of people chase that. They chase the glamour. And just about everybody I've ever known who left here and went to Los Angeles, I'd say 90% of them, lose that dream or get that dream stomped on very quickly within the first year. And then they're out, kind of never to approach that again, which to me is the saddest thing, because believe me, I have known people who are 10 times better writers than I am, 10 times better filmmakers than I am, who don't make films and they don't write. They'll talk to you about doing it. They'll these are the people who, will come up to me now. I mean, now that we're all kind of old, people come up, well, Willie, have you seen the latest Rene Gobert film? And I'll go, I don't know who that is. Oh, you don't know who blah, blah, blah. How people do, they want, I guess maybe they see me and they think, gosh, I wish I had done more or something. Then they come up and try to belittle you by trying to throw the most left field thing at you. And then when you say, I don't know who that is. Well, God, he's the greatest Armenian film director, in today's world, okay, I'm great. Yeah, I'd love to see some. So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of self-image that gets tied up in this business, a whole lot. And I always think if people can get beyond that, if you can kind of, maybe say bye-bye to your ego for a little bit and really do some things that you want to do, then you're going to be glad you did. I mean, I always tell people, listen, you don't get to start with book number 3.
Right.
You don't get to start with film number 5. Everybody has to get out there and do everything for the first time. And if you don't think it takes courage And if you don't think it takes so much physical courage to do that, because people, I mean, I will say, you know, in my case, and I have lots of friends. I don't think I have a lot of enemies, but when I first started making films, people would, you know, people who were known filmmakers would go, well, what are you doing? And I'd say, well, I'm making this film. Well, you're not really a filmmaker. And you know what? They were right. I really wasn't at that point. But within a couple of years, always those same people would go, man, I would love to do a project with you. And I'm just mean enough to go, yeah, of course we'll do that, you know. And you know, I mean, you learn a lot about people when you're down, you know, or when you're trying to do something, and nobody goes in with a clear vision, no matter what they're doing. I mean, if you want to be a dancer, you know, the first time you dance, somebody's going to go, well, you don't know what you're doing. You know, you're going to be a painter, you know. Somebody will go, God, that's terrible. You're throwing paint on a canvas. You don't know what you're doing. But it takes, you know, and that's where the passion comes in, I think. And also learning the craft. It's not all art. A lot of it is craft. I mean, probably seen that in your own business. I mean, you work in a high-tech business, and, you know, where you have to use technology to get where you want to go. And that's all craft. You know, you're not making anything up. You're learning how to use the tools at hand. And I think a lot of people kind of turn their noses up at that some, you know, which is really deadly for what you really want to do, I think.
It's, you know, I was thinking you were talking about how you know, people that were established filmmakers, probably people you looked up to, said, you know, what are you doing? You're wasting your time. And I could almost feel that hit in my chest whenever you said that. It's like, you know, this is something I love. This is something I want to do. And yeah, I may not be good at it now, but, you know, I'm going to keep at it and eventually I'll get there. And so it just, like, when I hear stuff like that, I always wonder, it's like, how do people persevere? Because it sounds like you were, for the most part, doing this on your own. You didn't, I mean, did you have any kind of mentors, anybody helping you through? Or?
You know, and I did. And I, you know, the story I told you about Shelby Foote, you know, the first thing I had on television here, he called me the next day and left a message on my answering machine. This was about 1998. And I got back from lunch and had this message, Mr. Bearden, this is Shelby Foote. I sure enjoyed what you had on television last night. I hope you'll do more of this.
Wow.
Please give me a call. And he gave me his phone number. Now, of course, the first thing I thought, it was one of my idiot friends. You know, I mean, what would you think? You know, I would think Shelby Foote wouldn't be calling me. But, you know, I called him, and he was so kind to me. I mean, we talked for maybe 2 or 3 minutes about my film, but he knew I was from Rolling Fork, and I came to find out that his father and grandfather were from Rolling Fork, and he used to spend time there as a kid. His grandfather lived on top of the big Indian mound there. I know that's bad juju, you know, but, you know, there are big Indian mounds along there. And his grandfather lived there. And so he loved to talk about the Delta. He had grown up in Greenville, Mississippi, which is up the road about 35 miles from Rolling Fork. But, you know, after that, after he said, listen, and he told me this, he said, storytelling is the highest art. And just do it. Do it however you do it. He said, you know, you're using technology that I don't know. And I said, what do you mean? He said, you know, I write with a dipped pen in a bottle of ink. And I said, what? I mean, I was like, what? I mean, it blew my mind. And he said, and later when we talked, he would always kind of talk about that. And he said, you probably got computers sitting everywhere. I said, yeah, I do. I really do. You know, and this is enabling technology, you know, but he said, He said, I found out that he wrote standing up. He had a stand up like a podium kind of thing, you know, and he would dip his ink pen and write. And he told me, he said, I never dip that pen until I know exactly what I'm going to write. So I don't like to scratch things out. And I thought, wow, okay, that's pretty zen right there. You know, I don't like to scratch things out. So, but talking to him, you know, he said to me one time, he said, well, and this is the only time he ever called me a writer. He said, well, you're a writer. And I thought, oh God, Shelby would just call me a writer. And he said, how many words can you write in a day? And I said, well, I can probably write 2,500, maybe 3,000 words in a day. And he laughed. He's like, oh Lord. He said, I'm doing good if I can write 250 words a day. And I thought, wow, you wrote over 1 million words in those 3 volumes of the Civil War, and you wrote them 250 words at a time? I was blown away. But he was the kind of guy who didn't suffer fools. I mean, he was kind of the old line Southern person. You know, he told me one time, I asked him, I said, you know, so when you were, you know, right after the Ken Burns documentary, you were so famous, you know, everybody knew who you were. Everybody wanted you to be on the talk shows and all this. I said, how did that play out? He said, well, I'll tell you what. He said, every damn fool in the world will come up to you and call you by your first name without being properly introduced. and he was kind of outraged at that. You know, it's almost like, well, wait a second. You're coming up and calling me Shelby? I didn't give you permission. You know, if I say, well, hello, you know, Mr. Bearden, how are you? Please call me Shelby. Then you have my permission to call. So he was that kind of old line Southern guy. And I like that. I honor that because that's what he knew. People behaved in a certain manner. And he certainly did. But, you know, he didn't sign books. I was at his house one day. The only time I ever sat down and like interviewed him was at his house. And I looked around his writing room and there, I don't know, probably 100, 150 books stacked up around, and they were all his books. And I said, what's with all the books? And he said, people send those books to me for me to sign. He said, I don't know those people. He said, I don't sign books unless it's somebody I really know and if I want to. He said, you don't own any part of me because you paid $25 for one of my books.
Wow.
And he said, I don't even send them back. You know, he was like that, you know. And so I think maybe I saw that I had a little bit of that in me. I had a little bit of that kind of schoolyard behavior when somebody would say something to me or not be kind when I was coming up, you know, especially, you know, in the filmmaking world or whatever. I would just kind of look at him and go, all right, watch this. Because you know what? I'm going to get out there and I'm going to work hard because I'm really interested in what I'm talking about. And I want to see if I can do it because I knew for certain that every film I did, I was going to become a better writer. I was certainly going to become a better editor. I was going to become a better cinematographer. I was going to learn this craft. I was going to have to think about it and learn these things and read about these things. And I did that, and I really educated myself. I will go back a little bit and say that I worked in 1978. I went to work for this company called Motion Picture Lab in Memphis. It was a 16 millimeter film lab, and about 100 people worked there. And I started off running a film processing machine, and quickly moved into like film setup. Then I was a film editor for about a year, and then I was an account exec, and they sent me around the country selling our services. So, you know, that was something, that was an experience I had that got me out and about in the United States. And I met a lot of people, and I saw that everyone was not like a Southerner. I saw that kind of the further north you went, people maintain this distance. I mean, even with their friends, you could tell, they're not real huggy people, they're not, things like that. And just, I would kind of looked at the psychology of all of that. And I often wondered, why aren't they closer to people? Everybody needs friends. Everybody needs to know that they're loved and they're cared about and they're valued. And I didn't get, and this is a gross generalization, but I just saw a lot of that up north, and it seemed like, people were friendly and everything up there, but there was always this distance between people, in Michigan and Wisconsin and in Minnesota and places, North Dakota and places like that. So I did get to travel a lot, and I met some really fine people who are still my friends today, up there, but they're just different kinds of people. And a lot of people had grown up around exactly the same kind of people. Like in Rolling Fork, we had, because the Delta was kind of the last frontier in that part of the world, there were a lot of immigrants that came in there around the turn of the 19th to the 20th century. And so we had lots of Chinese people in my little 2,200 person town, Jews, Italians, Syrians, Lebanese, Greeks. We had all these people. And so everybody kind of brought what they bring, to the party. And I always just assumed that everybody had grown up like that, but nope. You go places up north, in Kansas, and there's just white folks.
The Great White North, yeah.
And you don't get that like living in the South. We do have a, very diverse population here, and I love that too. But there were always things to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. Something that there's a lot. So I make notes as I go through this, and there's a lot of notes I have in here. There's some stuff that was from 10 years ago, so I can't go back. But one of the things you said is Foots was telling you that he doesn't like to scratch things out. I think I'm very much the same as well, but maybe in a different way. So instead of being careful and concise, like with these podcasts, I leave absolutely everything in.
Yeah.
Like I don't, unless there's some kind of weird technical issue, I'll take that out.
Sure.
But other than that, the story is the story, and I don't want to edit it for anybody else. I want them to hear it, take it in, and do that mental editing for themselves, right? Because I've noticed when I've read a book or I've experienced a piece of media, and I talked to 5 other people, they all pulled something different from it, right? They all might be on the same theme, but they all got something very different from it. And so I've always been afraid that if I edit it, I'm going to cut out that thing that would have really meant something to them, would have really stood out.
Sure.
So I love that.
You know what? That's beautifully put. And I've had that thought before. Certainly making films, you make an hour-long film and you go talk to 12 or 14 people and interview each one of those people for 40 minutes, an hour or whatever. And you go through there and you think, man, I wish I could use more. Yeah. I wish instead of an hour, I wish I had 6 hours, but nobody would watch it. Because that's where you really get into knowing somebody. And a few years ago, I guess 6 years ago, I started I was asked to do a television show, an interview show on WYPL, which is your public library, WYPL. In Memphis, they have a TV studio here, a very nice TV studio. And I told them I would do it, but it needed to be an hour long. And they said, yeah, of course, whatever you want to do. And I said, and I only want one guest. And they said, whatever you want. So I've probably done, I don't know, maybe 50 of those. I usually do one a month. And of course, COVID got us behind. But sitting there with somebody, and lots of times people that you've never met before, but sitting there with that person for an hour and having to kind of walk through their journey with them, I think it's the only way to get a true picture of somebody. I mean, and you're doing exactly the same thing here, which is great. I've done interviews with people, and then they've sent them to me, and they say, well, we took our hour show and we had to cut it to 16 minutes, and I'm thinking, whoa, hang on, but so you're doing the right thing. You're absolutely doing the right thing, because you really don't get to know a person until you've talked to them for a long time and you see how they do. And then that determines where you're going to guide this thing. And I say guide this thing, I've been talking my ass off here. So tell me what I need to talk about.
No, and I love this. I never know what I'm going to be faced with, and that's one of the most exciting parts for me. But I noticed, like, on your website, your WillyBearden.com, right at the top, you say storytelling is my business, and I think that absolutely shines through the instant you started talking to me, because you started telling me this. That's precisely what I asked for. I said, tell me the story of Willie, and without hesitation, you started doing it. And I love that, and I respect storytellers so much, because growing up, like, whenever I would read stories, believe it or not, like, I didn't really imagine things like reading, but as soon as I heard the teacher start to read the story, my imagination would kick in. So for whatever reason, I have to hear it for those parts of my brain to engage. I'm still that exact same way. I can read something and it just doesn't work, so I listen to audiobooks, and then all that magic starts to happen for me. So that's great. And that's what I found out that I really love, is people to tell me a story of one fashion or another. And you're amazing at it. And so I think you hinted at the dialogues with Willie Bearden that you had done. And so I, through the course of this research, I found a couple of those, and it was awesome. I really love some of the stuff you had done. One in particular, so I didn't have time to listen to a ton of them, but I was listening to one about, what was it? It's like playback theater, I think, Playback Memphis.
Oh, yeah.
That really fascinated me. I had never heard the concept or anything like it. And so I was like, man, it's so funny how I'll start researching somebody and that'll send me down a rabbit hole, to something else and something else.
Sure.
And I love that about your work, that it's just like so inclusive. Like it doesn't seem to be, well, I was going to say it doesn't seem to have any set theme, but your theme is, at least in most of these series, Memphis and the South. And it's definitely perfectly clear to me where your love obsession with the South comes from. So when you were talking about your mom and the beauty shop, the only thing that popped in my head, the one question I had was, can you remember what it smelled like in there?
Oh God, yeah, man, I'm telling you, it's you know how a permanent smells. Yeah. It's very chemically, but yeah, I would walk in there and I would get that, and sometimes I would sit with her when she was giving people manicures, because they did manicures too, and I could smell the fingernail polish and the acetone when they're taking polish off people's fingers. And I mean, I was sitting here when you said that, I could just see her filing someone's nails, into this beautiful nails, because, back in the 50s, and a lot of women, wear, and a lot of men, do, really, really nice manicures. But back then it was kind of everybody did, and I just remember my mother just painting on those nails and all that. And, those things are really as alive with me today as they were, I don't know, that was 60 years ago, whatever, 65 years ago, maybe, and I still remember all those things. And, one of my jobs was picking up the bobby pins and the curlers, and I'd put them back, because they had the racks, the little kind of roll around racks with the different size curlers in them. And in the the curlers kept getting bigger and bigger as time went on. When I was a senior in high school, I remember some girls in my class would roll their hair on like those frozen orange juice, orange
Right.
juice concentrate, those cans. They would roll their hair in those to make it really big, and they teased their hair and all that. But, there were just so many. So I always picked up all the rollers and all this stuff and hung around. I read Eudora Welty's book. It's called One Writer's Beginnings. And she probably released it back in the 80s or something. Eudora Welty was a really fine novelist and short story writer. She was from Jackson, Mississippi. Her house is available for tours. You can go in and see how she lived. She never married, never had children, and she lived her art. And she was a really fine writer. But in this book, One Writer's Beginnings, she said, I used to sit there, and I'm paraphrasing, I used to sit there quiet as a mouse when the old people were around, and I would be thinking, start talking, start talking, start talking. And she did. She loved to hear people talk, and you can read her especially her short stories. She was a master of short story. You read these things, and I mean, it's like your best friend whispering that story in your ear, and it's just so lovely. But the first time I read that, and that was probably in the 80s, excuse me, I thought, well, Eudora Welty stole that from me, because that's exactly what I thought, and obviously she didn't steal that from me. But I think there are a lot of people who understood that when they were around people, if they just listened, then they would be given a gift that would be with them forever. I remember, sitting in my grandmother's house. My mother was one of 9 children, and they were a big country family, and lived over in the red clay hills of Mississippi. And my grandmother had this big porch, and she had 10 rocking chairs out on the porch. And in the late afternoon, in the summer, it might be 8 o'clock or something like that, and we had eaten supper, and a lot of my aunts and uncles who lived still around that community, they would all come. They would call it, well, I had my night work to do, their end of day chores, whether it was milking cows or feeding chickens or whatever. They would come there and sit out on that porch for an hour or so, and they would talk, and they would tell stories. And I loved sitting out there and listening to these people. And I will say this, I was so lucky to have come along, because I was born in 1950. So to come along at the end of that rural period, when most people lived in the country and in small towns, I came along at the end of that. So I feel like I possess a good deal of that in my soul, that I understand how those people talked and all that. And I will say this, it served me so well. I was doing, I do a lot of museum work, and I was doing the Elvis Presley Birthplace Museum. A few years ago. We've done 3 big projects for them, and they asked me to pick 5 scenes from Elvis's life in Tupelo, Mississippi, because he was born in Tupelo, which is in North Mississippi. He was born there in 1935 and left there in 1948. So he was almost 14 years old when they left there. So he was pretty much grown, really. So I took these 5 pieces of Elvis Presley's life, and we made little short films about each one of these. And each film is, I don't know, 5 minutes, 6 minutes long, something like that. But when it came to writing that, I just channeled my aunts and uncles, because they were exactly the same age as Vernon and Gladys Presley, Elvis's parents. And so to be able to remember how people talked and what they talked about and all that, it served me well in my much later life, and just kind of knowing these things. So, and I will say this about doing museum work, I love that I've been able to do that, because right now we're sitting here in November of 2021, And I know that right this second that there are people in Tupelo, Mississippi watching those films that I made about Elvis Presley. And they play every day, all day long. And to be able to kind of like build that little boat, and you set it off to sail, and it sails for years. And every other museum project I've done, I think the same thing. There are people at the Cotton Museum, at the Mississippi River Museum, at the Blues Museum, who are listening to my words and understanding about who we are around here. And I do take that very seriously. And I do lean on the people I knew to help me tell those stories.
That's so interesting. What popped in my head is this museum work, like you said, build that boat and it sails for years. That's almost given you the ability to reach some kind of immortality with your work, right? Your voice will always be out there, even if it's not your physical voice, it's through your creative process. And it seems like when you were a kid and you were shocked that somebody saw you a specific way, this is you saying to the world in perpetuity, this is who I am, this is what I believe, and this is the legacy I'm going to leave. And now there's no two ways about it. You said in your own words, this is who I am, and you've left it out there for everybody to see, but not only that, to be enriched by it. And I think that's fantastic.
That may be the nicest thing anybody's ever said to me. Thank you so much. I got a little tear of you saying that, but yes, I mean, in a nutshell, that's exactly what I want to do, and I do feel like it's in some ways my responsibility to do these things, because I do feel like I understand these things on a very deep level, and to have that out there, that makes me feel great. I'll say this, my wife, Kim, runs the oldest cemetery in Memphis, Elmwood Cemetery. And that cemetery has been open every day since 1852. Now, think about that. Wow. They have records of every person's ever buried there. There are over 80,000 people buried there. They have the victims from the worst epidemics that this country has ever seen, which were the yellow fever epidemics, where at one time, over 5,000 people in Memphis died, where the population of Memphis back then in 1878 was about 50,000 people, and more than half of those people just left and never came back. And most of the people who stayed here got yellow fever, and many, many, many of them died. So I spend a lot of time in the cemetery because my wife runs that cemetery. And I always tell her I like to spend the maximum amount of time with her, because she is the smartest person I know, and the most direct person I know, and capable person I know. But I also tell people that when your wife runs a nonprofit, especially a cemetery, you don't get volunteered, you get voluntold. And so I get voluntold all the time to play different characters or lead a tour or whatever. And I love doing that because, this last weekend she did 2 tours, and I walked around the cemetery with her, and there are a couple of places where she says, now Willie's going to tell you a story. And I tell a story of a couple of people, one guy, actually a couple of people that I knew in life, who are gone now. And I love telling those stories, but I always tell people this. And I think it's one of the most important things people can understand. They say a person actually dies twice. The first time when your body stops working and you are no longer in attendance here with everybody that you've known. So you're dead, you're gone. But the last time, and probably the most important time that you die, is when the last person who knew your story dies. When your name is spoken for the last time, then you truly are dead. And I think I know what she tries to do, and what she accomplishes is keeping people alive. They tell stories of dozens and dozens or hundreds of people there. You know, they do costume tours and things like that. So I like the fact that we honor people, we give people dignity, even though they're no longer with us, and we honor the fact that their story needs to be told.
That's I've never heard it phrased that way, but that touches on some of my main insecurities. Is that I won't be remembered. You know, I've actually put a lot of thought into it. It's like, how do you leave a lasting legacy? Well, you could do something very monumentally bad, or you could do something monumentally great, but it's hard for any one person to do something so great, right? But to be honest, I can't Google you without finding you all over the place. So you've definitely left a mark. But something I always thought was, even if your name doesn't exist, everybody, like anytime you put positivity out and you actively are making a change in people's lives, right? Even if it's not drastic, even if it's just a gentle push that creates a ripple that, can, cover the globe, right? And so forever the world can be changed by you, even if it's immeasurable. So I like to think that hopefully in some way I'll be able to do that, even if I can't leave some tangible piece of me out there. But I like the idea that keeping people alive because they died twice.
Well, you're doing that right now. You're doing it right now. I mean, you're sitting here talking to somebody you had never met before, and we're parsing my story. But you're telling your story too, and I think that's a wonderful thing. Every time I get the opportunity to talk to people, whether it's people in the nursing home or it's juniors in high school or whatever, I always tell them the story about Mr. Foote being nice to me and encouraging me. And I always tell people that encouragement might be the greatest gift you can give another human being, because no matter who you are or what you do, where you go, every day you're around people who need something from you. And encouragement is that thing. I mean, it's amazing how, you have no idea what people are going through. I used to think that everybody who was rich was happy all the time. Everybody who was poor was unhappy. That's not it at all. You know that.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's just, people make their happiness, people make their hell. And I can't tell you how many people have told me, hey, I was at the Kiwanis Club meeting when you spoke a couple of years ago and you told about, encouraging people. And I try to do that every day. And I think, wow, you remembered that. Because I want people to remember that. I mean, and you don't have to go overboard with anybody. All you have to say is, hey, man, you look great today. Or, man, you are cool. I love you. Thank you for that. Or, whatever, and so, you did that great. Or, thank you for telling me that, I just, just to make people make their load a little lighter. Because, man, I tell you what, I know a lot of people who have been up and a lot of people who have been down. I've known people who have lost everything. I've known people who have been, in the depths of addiction and just hopelessness. And, it's that one step at a time. It's being very deliberate about it and doing it and finding some other people that you can lean on for a while. And then be that person that other people can lean on. And if that's not why we're here for, then I don't know what. And I think everybody does it in their own way. I just think there's so much we can do, especially when people feel completely powerless. You have no idea how much power you have. You just do it. You just do it. Whether it's standing up for yourself and saying, well, watch this, or whatever, or just doing something because you can see in somebody that they need something. They need something from you. And really what they need is just a little love. So I'm in that business,
I like that.
and I want to stay in that business.
I think, man, I sure hope you do as well. Something I've always told my kids is like, manners cost you nothing, right? Just to be nice to somebody, it costs you nothing, but you'll be amazed at how much it'll buy you, right? Because sometimes people just, they just need a little encouragement. And like this, the give and take, because I've thought about this before. It's like, you can't have a one-sided relationship. So people give me these amazing stories and I love it and I grow from it. And what do I give back? I try and see them. I try and see them for who they are or how they see themselves. That's what I want to see. And it's so funny that like at the very beginning of this, you kind of cut to the core of that. It's like, that's not who you are. And I want you to tell me who you are so that I can see that person and, have you live on inside of me or maybe through these stories. I love that.
Sure. Well, I think you're doing this, every day. I can tell, you're a good spirit, and you got a lot going here, and you're bringing a lot of goodness to the world, and whether it's goodness or or just introducing people to other folks. I mean, somebody they would never meet. They would never hear about. I mean, who would ever hear about me, But, they may watch this and go, wow. And, maybe I would love for people to go to my website, thewillybearden.com, and watch my films. My films are on there. A lot of my TV shows are on there. And, I hope it makes you smile when you see people, all the weird people I get to talk to, and all the funny people and the endearing people. It is it's a great gumbo of folks that we get to move with in this life. And God, I'm just I tell people all the time, I've just had a magical life. Even when I've been down, and things like that, it's still, I know that I'm here for a purpose, and I can wake up in the morning and continue, and I hope I always feel like that. I've only felt like helpless a few times in my life, but those times have given me the strength to go on and do some things and to not worry about what people are thinking or saying or whatever. You just go ahead and do it, because all that stuff is just noise. A lot of people live their lives just to make noise, but that stuff around you, you just kind of have to cut through that and go, okay, well, that's well and good. That's what you're doing, but here's what I'm going to do. So like I say, I have lived a magical life, and, and every day I get to, like I told you, I get to do cool things, cool people, and you're that cool guy today. So I appreciate that.
I'll wear that badge with honor for sure.
I hope our paths will cross many times.
I'm sure. It's so. I was in Memphis a couple of weekends. Well, what was it last weekend? Weekend before? I don't know. It was a whirlwind. Went really fast. No, it was the previous weekend.
Yeah.
A really close friend of mine had passed away, and so we went down there for his funeral. And after the funeral, we were running on very little sleep. We missed our flight, so we ended up having to just red-eye it down there. We just drove down there. And so we ended up just getting a few hours and then attending the service, which was, I'm so glad I did it. And after that, we went to the Peabody Hotel in downtown Memphis. We've never stayed there. We've always wanted to, so we did it. And we checked in, and my wife was exhausted, so she went to sleep. And I just went for a walk on Main Street, just downtown, because I used to work down there, so I used to enjoy it. And I don't know, man. I just kind of found my happy place down there, walking around and walking, just like the song says, walking around in Memphis. It's a beautiful place. And then subsequently, a few days ago, my wife and I were talking about it, and she goes, I don't think we're done with Memphis. And, I said, you know what? I don't think we are either. And, I'm not exactly sure if it's that way or if Memphis isn't done with us. I'm not 100% sure.
That might be the case. Well, let me say this. When you come to Memphis, let me take you to lunch.
All right. Let's do it.
How about that?
Absolutely.
I would love to do that.
Well, I wanted to ask you one last question before we close it out. One
Sure.
that's interesting to me. So you've talked about how you've written a lot of books, and I noticed you wrote on. So one of my questions was about the Elmwood Cemetery because it always pops up, and I was always curious why that's so important. But you very eloquently spoke about it already. But you wrote a book about it with a lady named Kim, who eventually went on to be your wife. Correct?
Yes.
How's that? How was that experience?
She said, if we can successfully write a book together, let's get married. And so we did.
Was that if I don't kill you through it, then I'll marry you? Is that kind of how she did it?
And we did great. We did great. We butted heads a few times, but we're okay. She is like I say, she's very smart. She was an English major, and so she a lot of times she'll read what I'm writing, and she can get the red pencil out. You need to do this. You did a run-on sentence, Willie. You did blah 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 blah. So yeah, we get along great. We've been together for 8 years, and I'd been married before. I met her in 2002 when I was doing the documentary about Elmwood Cemetery, and I spent a year just going out there because it hit me one day that every story in Memphis is represented at that cemetery. Mm-hmm. The civil rights upstanders. I mean, gosh, Dr. Benjamin Hooks, Russell Sugarman, the Maxine Smith, just all of these people are buried there. And the founders of Memphis are buried there. There are governors and mayors and madams and bank robbers and cowboys and Civil War people. Everybody's buried there. So I would just go there and park my car in a different place every time and just walk around and shoot headstones and write notes about people and then go research people. So I did that. And so when I was doing the interviews for the film, I was in the studio and they were bringing people in. I was, spending half an hour or so talking to them. And I remember sitting there writing something, I was writing notes, and I felt somebody come in and sit across from me, but I'd probably already had 7 or 8 people in for the day, So I was making some notes. I looked up and it was Kim. This was in 2002. And I thought, my goodness, what a lovely, lovely person. And she was so smart and all this. So, I had known her for a long time. And then in 2013, something happened with the universe, and it was decided that we needed to be together, and we've been together ever since. And so I go to the cemetery a lot, and in fact, in a few minutes I'm going up there. I'm gonna videotape her doing a story about a little angel, I guess it was a marble angel that was stolen from the cemetery, and she was stolen years ago, and she wants to find it. And believe me, when she wants to do something, she's gonna find that that angel. So yeah, I do spend a lot of time there, and I love telling stories there. But yeah, writing that book was it was really a lot of fun because we were kind of in it together. We were finding all these images, and having to write captions for images seems like the easiest thing in the world. It's very hard to do because I can't be that brief, as you've probably seen. I want to write 6 paragraphs about a picture, and they want, give me 30 words. I can't do that in 30 words. But so, yeah, Kim and I have been very happy for a long time, and I am the luckiest guy in the world. And if anybody out there ever gets a chance to come to Memphis, come to Elmwood. There's an audio tour. You can drive around and take it. I mean, and it's so beautiful. There's a Victorian statuary everywhere, and it's just gorgeous. It's a wonderful place.
Fantastic. Well, yeah, I tell you what, Willie, I am so pleased that Jimmy Ogle introduced me to you. You said you talk a lot. I think with Jimmy, I got to say 3 things maybe over the course of the 2 hours. So you let me say a few more things. No.
Well, you've got a lot to say. So, I should have let you talk more.
Absolutely not. No, I enjoyed it.
Maybe one day you'll let me interview you. How about
Yeah,
that?
I don't know if that would be very interesting, but for me,
Oh, I don't
for me,
know.
sometimes it's hard to talk because when I've got somebody telling me a story, I just want to just listen. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I could have, I think I could continue to listen to you, but I know you've got some stuff to do. So, right here at the end, I'd like to just thank you for your time. And golly, I watched a lot of your, so like the Elmwood stories, I watched some of those, and those are really
Okay.
fascinating, informative. The way you edit things together, the way you cut little interstitial pieces, your B-roll that you put in there, just it furthers the story. It really drew me in. Like all of these things just kept pulling me in. I knew that you were a kindred spirit and I needed to talk to you. And so I appreciate you putting out this positivity so much for so many years. I see why you're so well known over there. Just get it done, just do it, get started kind of guy. I love that. That was something I used to struggle with, was the fear of getting started on stuff, right? Just because I had to work out what was going to happen, and that was always so terrifying. But man, I have so many great quotes on here. I usually try and pull at least, there's usually at least one thing that sticks with me. There are so many things that are going to stick with me from this. The storytelling is the highest act. Don't like scratching things out. There's so many people die twice. Like that one, I'm going to have to think on that one for a little while. So I appreciate you nudging me in a different direction, changing me a little bit. So, at the very end,
it has been my pleasure. Yeah. This has been great, man. I've really had a good time.
Yeah, you definitely need to do more of this stuff. But I want to ask you, if you want people to interact with you on the internet somehow, what's your favorite conduit for that? How would you have them find you?
People contact me by email, and people can email me, and they can email from the website. You can just do the contact from there, or it's you can contact me. My email address is that's Willie with a Y, WillieB@AOL.com. I'm not sure, but I think I'm the last person who uses AOL.
I believe you might be.
Every morning they call me and, Willie, hey, this AOL. Look, everybody here at World Headquarters wants to make sure you're doing okay today, And so, yeah, I'm doing okay. Okay, we're just making sure, you're not thinking about jumping to Earthlink or anything, are you? No. So, but yeah, I have had that. I've been Willie B at AOL since back when you had to pay $42 a month to have email.
I get it.
Like at the beginning of this.
It's hard to let it go.
Yeah, Willie B at AOL. You can contact me, go to my webpage. Hit me on Facebook. I'm on Facebook. I read Facebook, and I love to wish people a happy birthday, because I think of that person for that, it's maybe 5 seconds. So, oh man, yeah. And I generally know how I know them. A lot of people I don't really know, but I wish them happy birthday too. And just things like that, we're here to do good, right?
Yeah.
We're here to spread some joy and to make people. My mother always said, make sure they're smiling when they see you coming, Willie. And I thought, okay, good. She would say, not laughing, but smiling. Okay, good. Yeah. So, I love to talk to people, and I have found that sometimes I am kind of a conduit for things for people, as people are for me. And people have this question that they need to ask somebody, and sometimes I'm that person. So if anybody out there who's heard this, got a question or anything like that you think I might know the answer to, please just reach out. I'm happy to help. There are lots of hours in the day.
All right, well, where do babies come from, Willie?
Well, this is a long thing. We're gonna have to. Hope there are no little ears.
Yeah, no. No, well, thank you so much, Willie. I'm gonna hit stop on all the things.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much.